A big part of why a solo sounds great is the flow. But it can be difficult to get that right, and very often you feel like you're trying the best that you can, but there's no flow at all and nothing fits together. The real problem is how you think about solos. And that was also the question that I took to my teacher in Copenhagen. I know what notes fit, the arpeggios, the scales, but I just can't really get anything to make any sense. Improvising over changes is a bit like walking. You never think about what you're doing when you're walking, about moving your legs or lifting your feet or how difficult it is to walk on stairs. But keep in mind that walking is complicated and we're still trying to create machines that actually can walk. And the best ones are so impressive that they go viral and get millions of views. That's also how you want to approach your solo. Think about where you want to go and get used to playing melodies that go there in a logical way. This can quickly become quite difficult, so let's start by making it a bit more practical. In this case, it's a D-7 that continues to a G7, and when you solo over it, then you need to play towards that G7. I remember being in a Kurt Rosenwinkel masterclass when I was studying at the conservatory, and he talked about how he wanted to play better lines on -7 flat 5 chords. So he practiced improvising over a -7 flat 5 chord for 10 hours, only to realize at the jam session the next day that a -7 flat 5 chord only came by for 1.5 seconds. So if you don't think about where you're going or just try to play something that fits the chord, then it's gonna sound like this. But you want it to flow and sound more like this. And all it takes is one note. You decide on one note on the G7 that your D-7 line should end on, and that will give your D-7 line a direction by deciding where it needs to go. This is what is called a target note. Great. And it is an amazing way to create naturally flowing lines. How do you think Bach's music works? Let's boil it down to a very simple exercise to start really hearing it. You want to reduce this to something that's very simple. Don't start with a whole song or 3 or 4 chords with all the chord tones. That way you're too busy trying to choose which note to target on each chord. It's way too much. Instead, take one chord change. Let's do D-7 to G7 and one specific target note in a position that you already know. Let's say this B. I'll talk about choosing target notes in a bit. Now you have this scale, which is C major. And the 2 chords are D-7 and G7. But for now you only need to think of the G7 as this note. And then start practice composing lines on D-7 that end on that B. So really just start with simple, basic arpeggios and basic scale stuff. Or something like this. And gradually you start to hear how this works, and then you can start to go a lot further. Later in the video, I'm gonna break down some more long examples like this one so you can see how that works. The examples you heard until now are constructed to be simple and easy to hear, but in the end, any note you can hear as a melody on the chord could be a target note. When it comes to choosing target notes, then the recipe for a clear target note could be described as a note that was not a chord tone in the previous chord. So in this example on G7, F is probably not the clearest target note because it's the third of D-7, where B was not in D-7, so that's a great choice. It can also be a note that's a defining part of the color of the chord. Now this might seem a bit vague, but for example, targeting a flat 9 or a flat 13 on a dominant will often be very clear in the context, even if they're not chord tones. Let's start with the easiest, most common and clearest target notes, the third of the chord. For the 2-5-1, that will give you this. On the D minor, the F. On the G7, the B. And on the C major 7, the E. And you can play a line like this, hitting the target note on each chord on beat 1 of the bar. As you can tell, then they're clear and very easy to hear, but if I play them a little bit out of time and really emphasize sort of the heavy beats, the gravity, then it becomes even more clear. And in that way, I think you can really hear that flow. As I already mentioned, then an important exercise, which is great for a lot of other things in your playing, is composing lines. I'm gonna show you some places where you can get some inspirations in a bit, but make sure to spend some time composing simple lines that move to the next chord. In the beginning, make it short 4-note melodies taking you from D minor 7 to G7 or something similar. That's a very common progression. You can quickly start to use other target notes as well, but start with the thirds. It will help you start to hear those melodies and help you think ahead towards the next chord. Both are incredibly important things to develop. But to give you an example that's using another target note and actually one that's less clear, here's an example going to the 5th of G7, which is of course the root of D minor 7. And notice how you don't have to fill up the bars completely all the time as well. I'll get to how you can open up this approach rhythmically in a bit, but first a few places where you can hear this in action. The person that's most famous for teaching this is probably Hal Galper, but it is all over bebop and actually also all over a lot of other music. If you have the Joe Pass guitar style book, which I made a video on a few years ago, then that's also a great place to hear this in action. I'm going to play this in that same way that sort of emphasizes the target notes, but that also makes it clear that that's really what's happening here. And I think you can really hear what I mean here, even if I'm messing up the time by playing it like this. Now, another place to check this out is actually a part of Charlie Parker's solo on Au Prévoir, where you can also hear that the line is going from target note to target note. And again, you can play this slowly to really emphasize that it is flowing from target note to target note. Let's just hope that Charlie Parker is not rolling around in his grave after I played it like this. This method gives you strong and clear lines, but since you always connect with the changes on beats 1 and 3, then it might get a bit heavy and a bit boring. But there are actually ways to open that up as well. And here are a few examples. To make it easy, I'm sticking with the third as a target note because we are already used to that. So here I'm delaying the target note on the D minor 7 and also on the C major 7 using chromatic enclosures, and I'm anticipating the G7 by playing that target note on the forehand. It's not set in stone that you have to hit the target notes on beat 1 and beat 3. That's just the easiest place to start. You can start working with these strategies to open up target notes and make it rhythmically more interesting and varied. But there are more options than these. Making a specific place in a bar a rhythmical target can be a great approach. So maybe practice hitting target notes on the forehand. But the best place to start is probably closer to bebop and learning to use chromatic phrases for this. Passing notes and enclosures now also have a much more interesting function where they surprise the listener and really have a rhythmical role as well. And the one you need to check out for this is definitely Barry Harris. I talk about that in this video, and his system is so much better than bebop scales, which I actually find pretty useless. Check it out, I talk about it in this video.